Hi, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of the Ethical Consumer Podcast. I'm your host, Julia, and today I am chatting with Jake Gratzen of Old Capital Tofu based in Iowa City. Welcome, Jake.
Hi, thanks for having me.
You are so very welcome. Now, the first question that I like to ask all of our guests, what is your favorite food? And it doesn't have to be tofu.
Well, actually, it is tofu. The main reason I started the company was because this was something that I wanted to have. I wanted to enjoy fresh tofu.
Excellent. Was fresh tofu the original idea, or did you go into this wanting to do like burritos or something else with tofu as the ingredients, or just straight tofu?
Straight tofu, pretty much. I mean, we had initially toyed around with the idea of making tofu a little bit more exciting by adding flavors to it, not
Mm-hmm.
just baking it on or marinating it, but kind of melding it into the process, which is still something we want to do. But it didn't take long in experimenting with that we realized we just had to make the best tofu first. And yeah, one of my main things I love about it so much is its versatility. That when someone has a block of tofu, they can take it however they want to, and this the quality of the tofu can go down really any path. So we wanted to be able to offer something to people that had a good launching point for all the ways they wanted to take it.
Excellent. Wonderful. Now, you are not the only person involved in Old Capital Tofu. In fact, you have a crew that is very much involved, from your packaging to your screen print to your labeling, but you also have a business partner. How did you meet Matt, your business partner?
Yeah, me and Matt, we met in college at University of Iowa. We were both art students, and we had connected over just kind of hanging out at the local watering hole. There, we get your bottles of soda or whatever have you. And we just always wanted to start a business, both of us. And this idea kind of cropped up, and we started to toy around with it. And we just really like working together. We have a good relationship. He's the one that's responsible for all those fantastic graphics you see on our labels, the tofu characters and all those things. And so his design work and my engineering work and our both of our mutual loves of food, we were able to meet on making this business, and we're still going strong after 6 years of the business, and I think it's been about 8 years of knowing each other.
Awesome. That's excellent. So you went to University of Iowa and you were art majors originally.
Yeah, I did a double major in accounting and ceramics.
Okay.
So yeah, they go well together. The accounting was not because I wanted to be an accountant. It's because I know that most entrepreneurs fail by the numbers. They can be very passionate about something, but if you don't have a good grounding in how the money moves in and out of your business
Mm-hmm.
and how it's recorded, if nothing else, then I've seen a lot of entrepreneurs have that issue, and it gets hard to unwind. My business partner, he did graphic design. So that paired quite nicely into our marketing and the food concept. And then, with my general business accounting skills, it's been a good partnership there.
Excellent. Now, the name Old Capital Tofu kind of has a nod to the Iowa City area, and also that ends up being a little bit of Iowa trivia. Tell us a little bit about the name.
Sure. We just wanted to be humble. We kind of wanted our name to. We don't, as a company, we do not want to sell or expand in a way that I call radial expansion, where you kind of have this production facility, and then farther and farther your footprint develops. You're just kind of shipping it farther and farther out there. We wanted to make sure that we knew that we were keeping our product fresh, and that our goals were not to kind of build something that could be sold to Nestle or any of the other big food companies. We wanted it to be kind of a part of this community, and so we didn't want it to be like best tofu or something, because it could be anywhere. We wanted something that kind of spoke to the area, and our name might be a little bit more stodgy, if you will, but we make up for it in our clever graphics and characters that we put into it. So
Yes. If I'm sure folks will have already seen this on the social media or the cover photo for our episode, but your tofu superhero man, does he have a name?
we call him a lot of different things. We don't have a specific. Sometimes he's superfoo.
I
Sometimes
like
he's
that.
tofu. Sometimes he's Tofu Man. Sometimes we have, random things we just come up with for it. We have our king character, which we have, King Tofu or King Fu. Um, yeah, we just kind of, we call him his royal tofu-ness sometimes. So there's a lot of, we don't have a specific name, but we kind of just play with it a little bit.
Sure, I love it. So, what's very unique about Old Capital Tofu is that, first of all, you're based in Iowa, if that was not already established. But Iowa is very known for our corn, pork, and soybean production. And soybeans are what you happen to use to make tofu.
Yeah.
And this is something we covered this. You've actually, she's the one who pointed me in your direction. Audrey Trunlam of Farming for Public Health. We did an episode together, and she mentioned that so many crops in Iowa don't end up getting used or staying in Iowa. They're shipped out of state. But
Yeah.
you get to use Iowa soybeans to make your tofu.
Yeah, one of my favorite sayings around this is that I was very proud to grow soybeans, but not proud to eat them.
Sure.
So we kind of wanted to make it something that is palatable. In a lot of ways, we grow our soybeans, we ship them to the best case scenario is another state, and then they turn it into tofu, process it, and then ship it back to us. But inherently in that process, you lose a lot of the quality and freshness. So it's almost as if, to use a non-vegan meat analogy, it's almost as if everyone only had Spam, how could you even imagine, a good filet?
Sure.
So in a lot of ways, all that people have had is the Spam of tofu.
Mm-hmm.
And we're trying to offer them this opportunity to have something that has a lot more freshness. Another statistic while we're talking about, a lot of our soybeans get shipped overseas. It's less than 10% of soybeans and corn that are grown are actually for direct human consumption. A huge significant portion of it goes into animal feeds.
Sure.
These are also different varieties of soybeans. You have soybeans that are different hybrids that'll have more protein versus fiber versus oil. And there's certain, we use a high quality tofu bean, so it's a lot of protein. But yeah, I mean, most of it ends up being animal feed. So I guess you could call that a part of our food chain, but it's a lot of waste.
Mm-hmm.
The animals themselves have a lot of their own issues and climate issues and environmental issues. And so, but the soybean itself is a very sustainable crop. And if we, you can just imagine if we're only using 6% of it for direct food consumption, that includes all of those fake meats that enjoy soy.
Sure.
There's all those are also extremely processed products, but that is a direct application of the soybean. So, we're talking over 90% of soybeans are this indirect, oil production / animal feed. And yeah, it's not the direction that I like seeing our agriculture go. So even though we're not changing those numbers at all. It's nice that we at least get to be a little bit on the right side of this one, in our opinion, and get to contribute more to a sustainable food system.
Sure, definitely. You mentioned previously that you do get your soybeans from Iowa as much as you can. Or no, are you 100% Iowa-based soybeans?
Yeah,
or do you have to?
we say for all intents and purposes 100%, but occasionally we'll get them from and I think this has only happened once. We got them from southern Minnesota because we use organic soybeans. All these organic farmers in this area work together. There's a lot of best practices, and they sell to the same houses. So for the most part, they're certainly within an eco-friendly footprint. But I would be remiss to say that it's always 100% because we're certainly plenty of the time, most of the time, if not effectively all of it, Iowa soybeans.
Of course. And that's the hard part when you're working with not only organic, but trying to stay local too, is that I would suppose most of the time the ideal part is to get 100% of it from Iowa, but you also have to kind of ride that fine line of making sure that you have enough soybeans to make your tofu. So if you're running a little bit low, do you get a hold of farms directly, or do you have kind of a middleman that you work with and trust to not only achieve the soybeans that you're using 99.9% of the time, but if you need to tap into another little unit if there's a dry season or something like that, how do you do that?
So we work with we have a partner in the soybean industry. They're actually where you are in Cedar Falls, Stonebridge Limited, and what they do is they work with the buyers and sellers of soybeans. That they help the farmers figure out what beans are in demand for the time being, and then they, by talking to the customers who are buying them, like us, and figure out what varieties should be grown, help them figure out where they're going to be moving, help them with cleaning the beans and packaging them for use. So they're an extremely valuable component. So they work directly with the farms, and we work directly with them. We have met a number of our farmers, so that the circle is completed. But being an expert in tofu, I don't have also the time to be able to become an expert in testing and
Oh, for sure.
growing soybeans.
Yeah.
So their role, nor does a farmer have the time and energy to figure out where exactly to market these beans. So they actually fill a very, very valuable role in allowing us and the farmer both to specialize in what we do. Um, and so when we do get a shipment of beans, they come from directly from the farm. So they've made the connection, they've organized the bean cleaner, and then they've helped the chain get to us. Yeah, and they're fantastic. Even in starting this business before we were getting going, they were so helpful. They're tapped into this community of farmers, and they're very dedicated towards what they do, and helping us even as a very small player in this soy industry. We get more than the time of day. They really, really, really care about what we do, and help us out well.
That's awesome. We kind of mentioned this before we got on our recording too, that the word broker is sometimes it's kind of it's an icky feeling word, because you think of a broker as someone that's like taking a cut, or, being the middleman, or, you're not working directly. But you've met most of these farmers. This was mentioned previously in an episode with Empower Coffee Roasters. They also use a broker to get their coffee beans, because they don't always have the time or the energy or the knowledge to coordinate everyone to their best ability. So in this sense, it helps you do what you do best. It helps the farmers do what they do best. And you guys don't have to be, I'm sure you're sending copious amounts of emails already, but they take a little bit off of your plate, and you trust them, you trust your farmers, so you get to do what you do best, which is make your tofu.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that both sides of the supply on this one, the farmer and us, are extremely happy with specifically Stonebridge, but also this kind of a concept. It really works well, because the farmers don't necessarily know the types of beans that are wanting to be bought, and the buyers don't necessarily know how to tell the farmers what to make. So it really helps secure that in aggregate. They're able to look at the whole picture of more people that are buying and more people that are growing, and help piece it all together.
Right. Awesome. It's a cool thing that I don't feel like people get to see, or don't get to know of behind the scenes. Like, I know when I did the episode with Audrey, I think I'm driving down the highway and seeing a whole bunch of corn and a whole bunch of soybeans that are staying in Iowa. Not the case. So it's nice to hear all of these little snips. That's you actually get a peek into what goes on in the food and beverage industry, and the ag industry too, which is directly connected to the food and beverage industry.
Absolutely.
So on making the tofu, when we get to the store, we see sometimes, as you coined it, I believe, the big white void. Was that what you had said previously?
Mine's yours sounded a little nicer. I call it the white hole.
The white hole, okay. When we get to the store and we buy our tofu, if it's local, if it's not, depending on where we're located, we see this spongy, squishy white product. And then you see a soybean and it looks nothing like tofu. What is your process to actually go from bean to magical squishy tofu?
Sure. Well, the first thing you do is you have your dried soybeans. That's what we get from our broker, from the farmers, and we soak them the night before we make tofu. So that gives us they expand to 2.2 times their weight. So 1 pound of dry soybeans becomes about 2.2 pounds of soaked bean. They expand as well. And from there, that once they're perfectly soaked, which takes between 12 and 18 hours depending on the temperature. We will grind them with more water, and that's what we call a soy slurry, or in this case, cold soy slurry, because the next phase is to cook it. So you cook it, you bring it to a boil. Boiling or cooking soy is extremely important to remove what is known as a trypsin inhibitor. It's the part of the soybean that just makes it a little bit more difficult to digest. So any soy that you eat should be at least cooked. But unfortunately, this is something that just boils off. There's no issue with it. It's not a hazard by any means. So you bring it to a boil. You hold it at a boil for 10 minutes, and then now you have hot soy slurry. From there, you put it through an extraction process to separate out the fibers of the bean that are left from the soy milk, which will become tofu. We can call that extraction. It's kind of like a depulping, if you want to think of it like that, to pulp out of the juice. So then once we have the soy milk, we portion it into our curding pots, where we'll add our coagulant, which is a mixture of magnesium chloride and water, magnesium chloride being the other half of sea salt when you take out the sodium. So it's a very, very bitter kind of a salt, and it creates a curd in a way. And if you get it right, that what was once a pot of full liquid looks like almost like between a jello and a pudding. Not quite soft like a pudding, but not quite really firm like a jello. And then when you break it open after it sets for 20, 30 minutes, that curd and whey separation becomes more apparent. So you break it open, and then the curd starts to sink a little bit towards the bottom, the whey starts to move a little bit towards the top. And the more you break it at this phase, the more you manipulate that curd, the tighter they become, the more whey they're expelling. And that's actually what defines the firmness of the tofu. Most people think that the firmness of the tofu is defined at the next phase, which is once you've taken out the appropriate amount of whey that you want to take out, you put it onto the press as a basket with a cheesecloth and put it under pressure. And people would think, oh, you put it under higher pressure, more time, that's what makes it firm. But the reality is, if you haven't broken it enough beforehand, the press will not save you. You have to make sure that it gets to the right level of firmness from the breaking phase. But yeah, you can think of almost the presses as more of a forming box. So you're certainly pressing out some of the excess whey. There's no doubt about that. But we do two types as an example. We do our firm, what we call firmer, and firmest, the est being deeper, more firm, I should say. But you cannot leave our firmer on the press for longer and have it become the firmest. It has to be broken beforehand. After that, we'll take it off the press, cut it into its individual portions. Then there's a rinsing phase to get off any extra surface whey or any little tofu bits that may have just stuck onto the block. Then it gets cooled and packed into the various methods that we pack it. One of them being the retail individual pack. Others being our more for our wholesale customers, we like to use a 4-gallon pail, and then we use a new liner in it. But when we give those to wholesale customers, they use the tofu, they save the bucket, they give it back to us, we clean it, and we reuse the bucket. So we try to have that as tight of a system as possible, and use the advantage of our self-distribution to be able to be a little bit more friendly in our plastic use.
Definitely. And one of those wholesalers is actually another previous guest, Kyle Seek of Local/Heartland Burrito.
Yeah.
Love
yeah.
Kyle and Lindsay. Yes. So fun. So I have actually, here we go. Here's the difficult part, because I live in Cedar Falls. You do have the retail tofu in some Hy-Vees. You have them at a few co-ops sprinkled throughout Iowa. It has not yet made it to the Hy-Vee in Cedar Falls. And the last time I was in Iowa City, I did not have a chance to swing by and pick anything up, but I have had it in Kyle's Burritos.
Okay. Well, we're going to have to get you to try our tofu as is.
Oh, definitely.
We're trying to expand our footprint right now, although we were expecting to be able to do it last year around this time, but as we all know, nothing has changed over the past year, and nothing was, different.
No, not at all.
Not at all. So we're planning on getting out there more this summer. So I would hope that at least within the next 6 months, I think we might be out in your area. I know
Awesome.
University of Northern Iowa is one of the places that we are going to use as an anchor customer out there to keep us coming out, and that allows us to be able to be in more of the places. So I'm looking forward to getting to
Excellent.
know Cedar Falls. I've
Well,
been out there a couple
definitely.
times. Yeah.
Likewise. For a minute there we were able to get the Heartland burritos at a local natural grocer here too, and I think just with the pandemic and everything right now, everyone's just pulling everything a little closer to their chest. So I am
Yeah.
probably one of the most I'm very excited to be able to continue these relationships with all of our guests that have been on, you included, just to be able to see your product expand and, like you said, increase your footprint and get into more areas, because that's really been on hold for the past year. No one was really picking up new SKUs in grocery stores as far as I could tell, because everyone was just not sure who was coming into the
Yeah.
grocery store, what was going to move, what wasn't. So yeah,
If it
I'll be
was, if it
excited for
wasn't a
that.
part of, if it wasn't a part of an online shopping experience, it's definitely difficult to find new products through that too. Yeah, this last year was a big challenge for us. We had planned to move into our new facility, or start moving into it. All the plans were going. We built it all out. We were planning on making the move March 2020. And so, right as we were trying to make this move, was right when things were really coming crashing down. And yeah, it was difficult to even consider how do we get contractors in to finish it. No one knew what was the right thing to do. Still don't quite know what the right thing to do is. But we're glad to have made it through, because a year ago things looked a lot different. Just trying to figure out if we made the right decision moving at this point, but it was like too late. So we're really glad that we were able to start doing more. But this is our chance. I'm hoping that we're just about to take our shot. We have a pretty loyal following, and people seem to really like what we're doing. We like making it, certainly. And yeah, we're ready to take our shot and see if we can get this to be something that can be in not just our area, but the other area in Iowa here. So
Definitely. That'll be exciting to see how that goes. And your new facility looks awesome. You posted pictures of that on Instagram and Facebook, I think it was. How much larger is it than the original?
it's if you include everything, it's about 8 times larger. So we needed the space. We couldn't in the old space. We couldn't have more than a month's soybean inventory on hand, and just because we didn't have enough place to store it. I mean, we were already
Sure.
super vertically stored things up in vertical space, but I mean, we couldn't accept pallets. We were getting them, but then we'd have to manually unload the bags, stack them onto our racks, and so you're loading 160-pound bags every month,
Oh,
and you just get a little tired of it.
just like a little.
So now a little bit. So now we have a loading dock, and we're able to just take the pallets, leave them on the pallets. So there's a lot of advantages that we've managed to have, let alone just having more kitchen space where we're not bumping into each other constantly, to try to make our product, which has been really great during this masked COVID time. We all of us managed to stay safe. We didn't have any problems, which is very fortunate, and we're all double vaccinated now, so that's also great.
Yay, me
Um,
too. I'm so excited.
so we feel like we were able to get out of this thing alive, and we're really happy to be in this new space. And now we can't wait to start being able to show it off, as we've been wanting to do tours forever, and we feel like this has been just our own little private castle that no one else comes to, and we just get to have it all to ourselves. But I think it's time to bring down the drawbridge and let everyone start coming over. Perhaps during this summer, I think, is when we're going to start opening
Yes.
up some small tours and see how those go, and see if we can get that done safely.
Can there be a what's it called? A costumed mascot of King Fu?
Sure.
I
If,
really feel like you need to make that happen for the little children, to have King Fu come waddling down the proverbial what did you just call it? The drawbridge.
yeah. I've been actually thinking of getting in touch with the University of Iowa Theater Department, 'cause there's a big costume developing, a bunch of students in master's program for costume design. I was thinking of seeing how much it would take for them to put one together for me. Maybe you could
Yes.
double as a project. and I could, get them a little extra student money. And yeah, I think that would just be a fun thing to do.
I think that would be awesome. I love just there's like you said, there's been a couple different iterations of King Fu or the Tofu Guy or Super Fu or whatever you said it was. But yeah, I just really feel like there needs to be a King Fu, yeah, or a plushie. You could have plushies. I don't know. I'm getting ahead of
Absolutely.
myself.
A little bit ahead of yourself, but
Too good, too fun. So in moving to this larger facility, you can store more soybeans so you have more on hand. I'm assuming, though, you guys have like the freshest of the fresh production cycles. So you probably don't store your tofu very long before it goes to your wholesalers and your retailers. But what is that average turnaround from bean to tofu to it's on the shelf? What does that look like for you guys?
Sure. Well, all the tofu, we don't hold any inventory, finished inventory of tofu, really. We have bean inventory, of course, but that's fully stable. All of our tofu we produce on Tuesdays and Thursdays right now, and it goes out the door on Wednesdays and Fridays. So Tuesdays tofu goes out on Wednesday. Maybe there's a little bit left over that'll go out on that Friday. But for the most part, we don't hold anything. We produce it to order, so we take the orders today, taking orders day. It's a Monday for those of you out there. We take all our orders, then we line it up into our Tuesday and Thursday production for either Wednesday or Friday delivery. And yeah, it's a big important part of what we do is making sure that it's fresh. I didn't want to recreate the problems I see in the tofu world, which is that it languishes in some warehouse, some cooler for some distributor, for as long as they think they can still make money off of it. And we want it to be a quality product first, which is the main reason we don't use distributors. I didn't want to have to worry about if someone else was going to care about our product as much as we do. Um, so not that they're not out there, not that those distributors don't exist, but and we also wanted to work with our customers. We wanted to make sure that the stores that were buying it were well served, that they didn't have any questions, or that the customer itself can talk to us or see us and meet us and be a part of what we do.
On that freshness, I remember when I was first looking for tofu. I have been vegetarian, vegan, omnivore, what have you, so many different times throughout my life. I just kind of keep flipping back and forth. Right now, my body was extremely tired, and I was eating meat for a little bit, and I'm currently moving away from that. But one of the first times I was looking for tofu, a Hy-Vee had just come out with their health market section, I guess, and I was looking for tofu. I'd never made it before. I didn't know what I was looking for. And the only thing I found was a box on the shelf. It was not in the fridge. It was this very gelatinousy looking thing, just like standard. You can find it anywhere. Maybe you can even find it at some gas stations now. Tofu.
Not quite. Maybe on the West Coast. But you're
Maybe,
not
maybe
finding
there you
it.
go.
Not in
Maybe not in
the
Iowa. Yeah. But that was the thing. Iowans just, and I think tofu is really very much having a moment. And even like, 10, 15, 20 years ago, I don't think you could find it at all in Iowa. But now we're actually getting, if it's an import, not a local producer too, like you guys, we do have some organic options, and most of them are in the fridge. But I remember seeing that thing on the shelf and thinking, why does that not have to be refrigerated? And also, if it doesn't have to be refrigerated, how old is that? How many people are actually buying tofu from my Hy-Vee? And
Well,
what's the
I know
expiration?
exactly what brand you're talking about. I know it
Yeah.
makes a difference. So it's a silken tofu brand, and the reason they're able to be shelf stable is actually it's nothing wrong with the tofu. It's just it's a different packaging and coagulation process. So I mentioned we use magnesium chloride. The other two very common coagulants are calcium sulfate, which is essentially gypsum, which is like drywall.
Yeah.
It sounds the problem there is not the mineral of what it is. It's
Sure.
the quality of the tofu that it makes is usually that's the one that you find in those white tubs. They're still refrigerated, but it makes the tofu a little bit chalkier. It doesn't quite get as firm. Um, and yeah, it's a lot cheaper. Not that the one we use is extremely expensive, but relative to it, the calcium sulfate is much cheaper. The other one, which is the one that you're talking about in these aseptic packs, that's called GDL, gluconodelta lactone, which is a vegan kind of coagulant based off of a bacteria. Um, and essentially, how that works is that they fill the container with the soy milk and coagulate it in the container.
Oh,
So all of them are silken tofus. There's none of them that are like a firm. They'll call some of them extra firm, but it's relative.
sure.
Even the extra firm ones in that silken tofu variety is going to still be pretty soft. But that the way that they define the firmness then is how thick the soy milk is. If you have a soy milk that has more of a protein content, and then you're going to end up with a firmer, if you will. So that's kind of a unique thing that's cropped up in the past, I would say 20, 25 years of these aseptic packs. It's the same way that they kind of package milk to be shelf stable. It's
Yeah.
still just milk, but it's kind of this specialized kind of aluminum lined, or not, I don't want to say aluminum, but it looks like it has a metallic kind of property to it, and that paper carton. Um,
Sure. The
yeah,
Tetra Packs, or I think the
Tetra
Tetra Pak
Pak. Yeah,
carton. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
that's exactly it. So yeah, that's something that's quite interesting actually. That yeah, those are coagulated in the containers. They fill with a soy milk, add their coagulant, I guess stir it up a little bit, close it up, and then it just firms like in the container.
Interesting. Yeah, of course, you are the tofu professional, but I mean, not only are you just a pro with what you do, but you understand the entire industry, what each brand or what each type does. I don't remember the GD something acronym that
GDL,
you just
GDL.
rattled that off. No big deal. It's fine. GDL is a lot
Well,
easier.
there's only three main coagulants. It'd be pretty tough in mine to forget those three.
There you go. There you go. Man. So yours is done. Since yours is fresh, like you mentioned, folks can order on a Monday. On Tuesday, it's made. It's shipped out Wednesday. Perhaps a few others are shipped out on Friday. You
Well,
are not coagulating. Sorry.
There's a Thursday production for
Oh,
the
Thursday
Friday
production
delivery.
too. Got you. So when you go through this process, you go through the slurry, you go through separating the whey and the curds. It really kind of sounds like making cheese. We're taught about cheese and milk process in elementary school, not about the tofu process, but it's really very similar. And then you go to press it, and the pressing does not indicate, I'm wrapping my brain around all of this because I was definitely one of those people that thought that firm and extra firm was just like how hard you pressed the tofu. Nope, I learned something new. And then you form the tofu with this press? Is this a press that you can just like buy, or is this a specialty press for Old Capital Tofu?
We design a lot of our own equipment. So the presses that we use were designed by us, and we used a local welder to put them together. We've gone through a couple iterations over the course of the business, but we have two of our press tables now. We have the one we were using at the old shop and the upgraded one that we learned lessons from the old one, but they're very similar, and we still use both of them. Um, Technically, yeah, you could just put like if you're just making tofu at home, you put a can on top of it and a 10-pound weight or something, and that would do the job. You want something that just continually applies pressure. Since we're making, larger slabs, and because of that, you need kind of a more heavy pressure than just, 10 pounds. We use pneumatic cylinders, so it's an air power, air pressure. But for the most part, all the components of making tofu are something that you could do at home. I wouldn't necessarily recommend it because it would take you about 4 hours to make a block of tofu, and it wouldn't turn out as good. Because there's a lot of for the three ingredients that there are, the soybeans, water, and the coagulant. There's a lot of technical kind of understanding, and you want to make sure all your temperatures line up with if the soy milk is too hot or too cold, it changes how it coagulates. Too thick or too thin. So there's a lot of different ways that it can get away from you. But yeah, the reason we design a lot of our own equipment is so that we didn't want to just be making someone else's tofu by buying that equipment. We knew that a big portion of what makes us special is that the center part of the process of coagulating it and breaking it and getting it on the press. We wanted to make sure that stayed handmade and then kind of figuring out how our process works. We also like the look of our product, which is our baskets are custom, the press baskets. So they have a little bit of our look to it. And we didn't want to just be making someone else's tofu. We wanted to make the tofu and that was actually a big consideration in when figuring out how to expand into this new facility that we're in now. Is we wanted to make sure that in expanding that we weren't losing our identity. Just because we were able to make more, we didn't want to all of a sudden be sacrificing our quality. And in fact, I think we've moved in the other direction. We're actually making it a lot better because we have more space. We're able to do things a little bit tighter and more efficiently. And yeah, we're making our best tofu ever. And I also would have said that a month ago. So it's even better than it was then. Um, so we're every it's been about a year in the new facility, a little less of about 9-10 months of production in the new facility, and we're still getting better at it. Certainly better than it was in the old facility at this point. So we're really pleased with where we're going, and we also just love designing our equipment. I really just like doing it. I like figuring out how all these things fit together, and I can't wait to do more of it as it becomes necessary.
I love it. So, would you, when we're talking about scaling up, as you're hopefully coming to Cedar Falls at some point and perhaps Northern Iowa, would you be making more presses or pressing more tofu or scaling up the actual press that you use? How many bars of tofu do you get out of one press?
So we have 8 press stations. So there's 4 on each table, and each one of them, a batch, uses all 4 presses on one table, and each one of those presses is a slab of tofu, and that slab gets cut into 25 blocks. So one batch makes 100 blocks of tofu. So since we're only producing 2 days a week right now, our next thing is to just start adding production days, expand onto more delivery days as well. We're working one shift, and there's a lot of cleanup involved in a given production day. So what our goal is to kind of be able to expand production day so that it goes a little bit longer. Because the setup and cleanup is a fixed amount of time, whether we make one batch or 20. So we want to figure out what that right balance is. Obviously, you don't want to go forever without tearing it down and resetting. But for the most part, the kettle can just keep on cooking. The extractor can just keep on extracting. Those things just keep them hot, and everything has a good amount of just cycling through. So yeah, there's a couple of ways to expand it, and then further down the line, if we're producing on all the days and we think we've expanded each individual production day as much as we can, yeah, absolutely, we can start adding more presses. Start figuring out what is the bottleneck currently, and start to add new machinery or labor to that. The classic economic thing of whether you want to add capital or labor. We'll start asking those questions, but we like having it be very much more handmade. We know a lot of the things, if we start to expand, that we're doing now will need to change. Like the way that we soak beans. If we get to a point where we're producing maybe even twice as much as we are now, we need to be able to have a better solution for soaking beans, because at a certain point, there's just too many to move around with just a paddle. So eventually, you need to move up to something that can stir it on its own. Now, 'cause when you soak the beans, they first go through a rinsing and a cleaning process, which involves a lot of agitation and moving them around and doing that a couple times. But and that's not so bad at the phase we're at now. But if we had to double the amount of beans in those tanks, yeah, that's a workout moving them around. So at a certain phase, we just have to start to expand these stations. But we purposefully started it in a way that was more human centered. If we're just talking about this bean soaking, because we didn't need to make that huge investment in that piece of equipment just yet. We had more things to focus on. So we're still doing our bean soak in a very similar way to the old shop. And then eventually we'll make it a little bit easier on ourselves once we can afford it.
Do you wear like a Fitbit or an Apple Watch that calculates the amount of times that you're like stirring the beans? Is there a guess on that, or do you stir in the opposite direction so your muscles don't get tired?
I don't want to know how many.
You don't know how many.
I don't want to know.
Oh man, one of my fiance is a percussion professor up at University of Northern Iowa, and one of his students was wearing her Fitbit when she had to play the bass drum as fast as possible, and she got like miles out of this 20-minute piece because she was moving her mallet so fast. I thought that was funny. But yeah, man. Well, you're going to have to get everyone a gym membership now that they're not going to be stirring the beans on their own. If you get
there's plenty of time for them to stir the beans on their own. We're not crossing that bridge just yet.
Not yet. No. We're good where we are right now. Funny. Yeah. So you mentioned when we talked previously, the white void or the white hole, as you call it at the grocery store. That really is what it is. When you walk into a grocery store and you're looking for tofu, and if you go to the silken shelf stable, of course you see their packaging, but if you go to the fridge, typically there's just this big white hole in the refrigerated section.
Just the side of these ubiquitous white tubs. They're all just stacked on each other, and you kind of have to you have to pull it out and look at the top of it, and they all market them exactly the same, which I don't understand it at all. All of them have a picture of some dish with some pieces of tofu on it, and then they'll say like, whatever the brand is, extra firm, here's the ingredients, and I said, at this point, I'm like, do people need to see that dish? Who's doing that? It's not even a recipe. It's just like there's chunks of tofu on something. It just never made sense to me, especially because you're looking at tofu.
You can see it. It's usually clear. It's like, here's the actual thing. Here's the picture to make it look more pretty, I guess.
At a certain point in history, I bet it made a lot of sense because people didn't know at all what tofu was.
Sure.
But at this point, I feel like it's this holdover. And this is just my conjecture, and this is kind of why we went the way that we did. But I think that when people, at least nowadays, if you're buying a block of tofu, you kind of know what you're doing with it. If the more you are on the plant-based, maybe it's just a staple in your fridge, and on any given day you pull it out of your fridge and you decide what you're going to do at the moment. But I don't think there's a lot of people that are like, what's this? And then pulling in the cart. I think, and I wish it was more like that. And that's kind of what we wanted to do with our labeling is we wanted it just to be a little bit more fun. We wanted our thing to just be more eye-catching. Instead of kind of going this more buttoned up approach to packaging, which I think those white tubs very much so are. You only see the side of it, which is super weird on that. And then, when you look at the top of it, there's really nothing that is interesting about it. There's, maybe a couple of green leaves because there's like plant-based or something like that. But it's a very stodgy kind of a brand identity. And whether or not we're doing it better on the other end, I'll leave that up to our customers to decide. But we just wanted to have more fun with it. We didn't think of ourselves as wanting to run a more stodgy, formal food company. The only part of ourselves that we take really, really seriously is making the tofu well and clean. But as far as the branding and just like enjoying, being a part of this food community, we want to be a part of it. We want to just have fun with it. We don't want it to be something that's taken so unbelievably seriously or anything like that. So hence the different tofu characters. And then also we knew that we could just vacuum seal it just to be more. We still have to use some plastic, unfortunately, which is something that I would love to be able to get away from that eventually, but it's a lot less. By weight, we use about 1/5 the plastic than those white tubs.
Nice.
There's something to be said for that.
Yeah. Plastic is a difficult thing because it just has to exist, especially right now. I mean, I really do think technology is going to eventually catch up, and we're going to have different ways of doing things where, like, you have to keep a liquid contained. That's difficult. Or you have to make sure that your tofu block is not going to dry out. Like that requires something being completely sealed, which right now just has to involve plastic. But the fact that you've done it in a better way, I think just any step in the right direction is progress. And the fact that you're already thinking about it, but maybe the technology just isn't there yet. Is there a way to buy tofu in bulk? That I have not seen.
Yeah, you really need to be in a community that really supports that kind of concept. A lot of in a lot of big cities, Chinatowns will have it. Places where there's a large Asian population. There is certainly markets in your more progressive places in California, Oregon, New York, that have some of these things, but it's very common in Japan that you'll have or probably China as well, and Vietnam, Korea, all these places that use a lot of tofu, because in their culture, tofu isn't other. It's just a part of the protein. It's just another protein. They'll think of, oh, and also they don't have a qualm with mixing them. Like, for example, one of the famous tofu dishes is ma pao tofu. It's a very spicy tofu dish, a chili red sauce with tofu in it. But traditionally, they use crispy pork with it as well. So that's something, and a lot of tofu soups will have fish stock or fish base to them. So to them, it's just another protein. They don't really distinguish it as like, oh, this is for vegetarians and for vegans. And because of that, it gets more of an identity. So you might think of it almost as like what we think of as a butcher shop here, they have for tofu. So you'll have the day's tofu, you'll have whatever they make with it, whether it be fried tofu pockets or other things that are used. But yeah, I would love to visit some of those because there's some really really old traditional tofu shops that I'm sure are making some fantastic tofu.
Right. That would be cool to see. And just the way that they're doing it, like you said, having it be, it's just like the meat counter at a grocery store because
Yeah,
it's not something that's like odd, air quotes odd. I don't think tofu is odd at all. I love tofu. But yeah, like you said in the beginning, I was really good at producing soybeans, but not as great as appreciating soybeans and tofu in general. So it's probably going to be a while before we see a bulk tofu location, because what would that entail? Do you think they keep it in just like, I'm picturing large tubs that we would like throw dirty dishes in as servers and bartenders and whatnot, just like a large container of
yeah,
tofu, and then they cut off a certain weight amount just like they would a block of cheese?
yeah. I mean, that could be it. They could be pre-cut. I mean, yeah, you could have them probably submerged in some kind of water, some
Sure.
shallow pool, or maybe overflowing water, and then
Hmm.
yeah, cut up a chunk and put it on a scale, wrap it up. And yeah, I think that most people probably wouldn't even think of it as something that would need a lot of packaging. I mean, it might
Sure.
even be just like a piece of waxed paper or something like
Hmm.
that. Just wrap it up in and then get out. I'm sure it depends on the tofu because you can get tofu that's very, very soft.
Hmm.
That is just meant to be eaten almost like a pudding. They find it to be very refreshing and cool. A little bit of soy
Huh.
sauce, they a little like almost eat it just like a pudding. Um, but yeah, our Western palate for tofu certainly wants it to be firmer.
Sure.
The firmer that you can make it, the better. So that's also in terms of packaging. If we were to make a softer or a silken tofu, we'd have to find a different way of packaging it because our
Hmm.
vacuum sealer wouldn't be, it just that we need something that was more like that white tub, unfortunately. Something that has some structure to it that can protect it a little bit more than our
Hmm.
bag. Because our firmer and firmest tofu both have a nice heft to them. So they can hold up with just that thinner bag.
Does yours require much pressing? Because I always find that is a slight, not a drawback at all, but I just have to think a little bit in advance when I'm wanting to prepare a tofu dish because you do have to press it to get the excess water out if you want like the firm cubes. Does yours come? Because I have not seen it because I've not been going out and about. I would usually go to Iowa City like once every
Sure.
other month at least, but that hasn't happened in the past year. Does yours
Yeah.
come in a water or a brine or some sort of liquid, like you mentioned, or is it pretty dry?
Well, I wouldn't call it dry,
Or that was yeah, not dry.
there's no excess liquid, so or very minimal, less than a teaspoon. That would just be what makes its way out of the tofu. But
Sure.
one of the when I'm going back to the coagulants, the calcium sulfate, which is the more ubiquitous one, leaves tofu that's a little bit more porous and more
Mm.
wet. So there's more open pockets in it, which ends up being a little bit softer. Um, and then since we use magnesium chloride, it ends up with a tighter curd. And then we also press it at a higher pressure. So our tofu, once it comes out of the package, you actually won't be able to squeeze out much water. You can if you really just wanted it to be super dry,
Hmm.
you just pat both sides with a towel. But it's not going to be draining out like you think of when you think of those white tubs.
Sure.
Um, and also because they're soaked in water, there's just a lot of loose water. I'm as someone that hasn't been to all these tofu places, I think there's actually a little bit of a dirty secret out there with them, where they're specifically not pressing out all the water just so that their product can be heavier.
Mm.
That's a little shade at the other tofu companies, no doubt. But we wanted to make sure that we're giving just really dense product. So
Sure.
yeah, we like to say that there's just really no need to press it. That you can just take it right out of the package, cut it up, and if you wanted to, pat dry both sides. Just if you needed to have something stick a little bit better. But no, you don't have to squeeze out any extra moisture, which I know is a big issue for a lot of people, where they think of that as how tofu has to be, and
Sure.
that kind of falls into the spam versus a fillet category. When all you've been fed is this thing you've had to squeeze out water, how can you even imagine one that you don't have to?
Right.
So,
No,
so
that would
try.
be ideal. I'm glad I thought to ask you that because that's my one thing with making tofu dishes is that I have to make sure I leave myself enough time. Otherwise, like you said, if you need like a spice or something to really stick, if it's all wet, it's just gonna slide off. Like when it's
Yeah.
in it, yeah, to use the word dry as you're packaging a dry packaging. Dry is not anything we want to associate with tofu, but less moisture.
Yeah.
It when you go to stick it in the frying pan too, if you're frying it up with a little bit of oil and spices, uh, it gets a little scary when you have a very damp tofu going against the frying oil. If your
Yep.
hands get too close to it, it's a little dangerous. Not that I have personal experience with that or not, but that would definitely get me to. I already do probably at least once a week or so. That would get me to eat tofu more frequently, simply because I did not have to go the extra steps and plan 2 hours ahead of time to press anything.
One
That's
thing
ideal.
that's interesting about the white tub tofu is since you do have to press out this extra water, yeah, you're getting some water out, but what you're left with is kind of this very spongy, because the water came from somewhere, it left with these
Hmm.
little pockets behind. When you do go to fry it, it actually ends up absorbing more of the oil, so
Hmm.
it doesn't get as crispy. You'll end up with this. Whereas our tofu not doesn't have as many of those pockets, or really any of them much at all. So you end up frying it with less oil, and it gets crispier. So
Nice.
that's actually been a really big benefit to some of the larger institutions that we do. We do some of the local colleges and universities. And when they're frying a bunch of tofu, we save them a lot of time because ours will fry quicker and then it takes less oil on it. So it's really a win-win for everything they're trying to do because I it really can be a little funky if it absorbs too much of that oil before
Hmm.
it's able to fry. It's not ideal.
No, definitely not. And then you see how much oil you're adding to the pan, and you're thinking, where's this
Yeah.
oil going? Oh, I'm eating all of it. Oh, no.
Yeah.
I hear you. So you mentioned you are in several universities and restaurants, locations that are using it in bulk as wholesale, if you will. You're at University of Iowa, is that correct already? Are you in a dining center there?
Yeah, we do the tofu for all of their dining halls. So
Yes.
yeah, we also do Iowa State and Grinnell College and
Nice.
Cornell College. And actually, where you are at University of Northern Iowa, that's a customer that I'd like to start talking to. when we were in our old facility, we had talked to them, but we couldn't get up there at the time.
Sure.
But there's a number of other places in the area that we're looking forward to doing. Just speaking of colleges and universities, Drake in Des Moines is a place we'd like to be, as well as Central College in Pella.
I almost went there.
Oh, really?
I did. Almost went there.
Yeah, they're all over the place. Let alone we'd love to start doing more institutional things like hospitals,
Sure.
and retirement facilities, perhaps. Not so many restaurants that we'd like to be doing. Plenty of grocery stores, but again, keeping it to this area. We really want to make sure that our footprint doesn't get too large, or if it does need to get that large, we would consider building another facility in that area. If Wisconsin really wanted our tofu, we might, and we've tapped out where we're at. We'd much prefer to build one closer to them and have the whatever Wisconsin's version of the old capital is.
There you go.
And,
have it be local still, but there's two locations of local.
Yeah, I thought of it as expanding by pods in the past, where you're kind of making these little bubbles of locality, but then again, all of them would be able to share best practices. Like if we here found a way to save, extra water, we'd be able to share that best practice with the other places. So we kind of has a little bit of a production franchising element where, we're kind of making the same products, but closer to where people are at. And that's a pie in the sky kind of dream where we're headed, but for now, we're just working on making the first pod work.
There you go. Excellent. Now, where can we find you in addition to perhaps at certain dining centers, New Pie Co-op, I think I had already mentioned. Are you at the Wedge too? You're at several Iowa co-ops.
We're I don't know if the Wedge is, but so I guess not.
That one's Ames, I think. Yeah.
Oh, you mean Wheatfield Co-op?
Yep, I'm thinking of something else. I'm thinking of one in Minneapolis, and they both start with W. Wheatsfield, thank you.
Yeah, so we're in Wheatsfield Co-op in Ames, Iowa. We're also in the Hy-Vees in Ames as well, and then we're in all the Hy-Vee food stores in Iowa City, a couple in Cedar Rapids. But you're really, by the time of this, of us having this interview, we're just about to start doing more. So. We are going to be in Des Moines and Ankeny, hopefully quite soon. More in Cedar Rapids, the Quad Cities, Cedar Falls. Des Moines is one of the places that we're actually not in at all. And we have a lot of requests for us to be in Des Moines. We're just starting to go there. And the reason we haven't been out there is simply because in the old shop we couldn't make enough. And in this new shop, we've been trying to first figure out make sure we're doing it well, and then also navigating the pandemic and just making sure that we're safe. We weren't under that much of a time crunch, and I had to really worry about sacrificing my health or the health of our employees to just make sales. So sure. I was happy to do that, but that's coming. So the list is smaller right now than I'd like it to be, but I'm hoping that pretty soon we'll get that nice boost and we'll be able to go to more places.
Definitely. Jake, this has been so great to just hear about your tofu and also just the process of tofu in general, because yes, I mean, as a consumer of tofu, I still don't know all that goes into it and the different types and the different coagulants and things like that. So yes. I think this has been really interesting. I know our listeners will too, because this is really what we're all about, connecting where the food on our plate comes from. And sometimes we don't understand the processes that everything has to go through and the people behind it too. And I love that you're about the fun. You're about making high quality, damn good tofu, but you're also going to have fun with King Fu and things like that, and doing tours and making it enjoyable. Like you said, it's not astringent and stuffy. It should be fun.
Yeah, we don't have any boards of directors or shareholders. We're just able to do kind of make the best product we can. We
Sure.
hold ourselves to a very high standard, and then have fun with it. We get to set our own culture, and that's a big part of what we wanted to do in starting a business.
So if we want to find more information about Old Capital Tofu and ideally perhaps come to a tour at the facility. Eventually, when that's able to happen again, we can find more information at oldcapfood.com.
Yes,
and
that
then
is correct.
Awesome. You have a Find Our Tofu section as well. We mentioned a couple, the universities and a couple co-ops, a couple Hy-Vee locations, but even more are on your website that folks can find. And then what are your handles on Facebook and Instagram for everyone to find you and see the amazing pictures of your facility?
We are at Old Cap Food.
Old Cap Food on everything.com and Instagram and Facebook.
Yeah, I think we got a lockdown on that one. So,
Awesome.
we're not as active as we'd like to be on social media, but we're trying to get a little bit more now that we're
Sure.
figuring out our lives and show you more of what we do and how we do it.
Excellent. Well, guys, this has been another episode of the Ethical Consumer Podcast. Again, having Jake Granson from Old Capital Tofu, and I will see you next time.